So I'll start with Riley and work my way down. So Riley, if you'll tell us a little bit about your background and then your goals for NCAE as a vice president. And thank you for joining us again, everybody.
Absolutely. Great to see everyone. Thanks for organizing this meeting. I'm Riley Finnegan. I was born and raised in High Point, North Carolina, so I'm a Guilford County Schools graduate. I've been a high school social studies teacher in Durham for the last several years, and here I'm a middle school avid teacher in Chatham County. In my time in NCAE, I've done a lot of different leadership roles. I was a board member in DAE, was a full-time member organizer, and the co-chair of our campaigns the last 2 years. And yeah, I'm running. My goals are very aligned with Christina Coles. She's running for president. She asked me to run with her as her vice president because we were both really aligned on goals for the future of NCAE that revolved around growing membership and really doing that smartly and in the right way, and focusing on density, building structures, democratic structures for decision making and organizing, so that we could run really effective campaigns that could help us win better working and learning conditions. So in essence, what I want to do is take everything I learned from being a leader in Durham, and now what I'm learning this year from Chatham, and bring that to the state level to help coach other locals to do work similar to what Durham's done in the last 3 years, to help smaller locals like Chatham, starting more from square one, so that we can flip the General Assembly before 2030, before 2031 at the latest, because it's just absolutely vital. I think it's life or death for public schools to not have privatizers in power in 2030, drawing new maps, gerrymandering again, et cetera. I don't think we survive that as public schools if they entrench their power again. And yeah, the future that I think privatizers want is kids on laptops all day, like some of these online charter schools, 90 kids in a gymnasium working, with an AI software instead of working with a teacher. And that's not the world I want to live in. I was born, I was really raised by public schools and taught, everything that I've learned about community and diversity and democracy, thanks to being a public school student. So I'm ready to fight as hard as I can. And I think we have a strategy that can work. Durham tripled in size in a year. One meet and confer, have won historic policy changes through meet and confer, and then also just elected a school board majority slate with all the same organizing skills, helping them win every step of the way. And I think if we can do that in 5 or 6 or 10 more places by 2030, I think we flip the GA. So that's what I'm committed to doing.
Okay, thank you, Riley. And Brian?
Thank you, Lavetta. Hello, everyone. My name is Brian Link. I am the son of a principal and an English teacher. I grew up in the public schools, went through them. I am currently a social studies teacher at East Chapel Hill High, and I also serve as our school's Social Justice Academy director. I've been involved in NCAE a long time now. I've served as a local vice president in the Chapel Hill Carborough City Schools. I've served and currently serve as the local president of the Chapel Hill Carborough City Schools. I've also served statewide. I have, in my second term as the Region 4 co-director for NCAE, and there have sat on the GRC committee, have sat on the Finance and Personnel Committee, and have a true understanding of how the organization works from the inside out. And I put my name into nomination really for 3 reasons. One, I want to make sure when we talk about member democracy, and I support a lot of what Riley has just mentioned, that we're truly supporting it through proper due process. I know the retirees recently went through an experience where they held an election and the state sought to invalidate it. And in fact, we experienced a similar thing in our local. And our leadership stood up and said that playing by the rules is important, and that we can't let a small subset, right, speak for the whole. And so we had our election challenged, but we won that challenge. And I want to make sure that we as an organization don't become who we are fighting against. I absolutely believe, right, that we need to win, but we need to make sure that we win the right way and honor, right, the structures and people and processes in place. The second reason I'm running is that as someone who is very well knowledgeable about our current finances, is we are facing this coming year, and there's going to be a vote on the budget in March, a decision on whether or not we need to continue to deficit spend. NCAE is proposing a budget that is going to spend more than $5 million than what we're scheduled to bring in. And where would that pot of money come from? It comes from, right, us, the people, the folks who raise money. In fact, many of you on this call who were there working at the time, who raised money with cans and pennies and dollars, that bought the NCAA building that was only recently sold, right, under the current administration. And unfortunately, there's been no real effort to look at and try to find a new permanent home for NCAE. We're currently renting out offices right near Raleigh, but there's been no, and there was a promise made to folks saying that if we were going to get rid of the old building for costs, which it was a difficult and hard decision, one that I can understand, right, that we need a new permanent home going forward. And instead, what's happened over the last 6 years is we've engaged in an experiment. And I'm all for trying something new because, again, right, where we were going and where we were headed was not a good place. And that experiment said that we needed to put money into organizing, largely at the expense of pretty much everything else the organization does. Many of you know Marge Foreman, for example, the longtime lobbyist for NCAE, right? When she retired, we still have not replaced, nor have we hired a lobbyist for NCAE. And if you want to talk about effectuating change, especially at the state level, right, we need to be, to quote the Hamilton musical, in the room where it happens. And right now, those conversations aren't happening because our resources were being poured essentially, primarily or solely into this idea of organizing. And I will acknowledge, right? And they said we had seen declining membership rates. And I said, as a board member, let's try this experiment out. We were given projections of what we were supposed to achieve in terms of membership growth and what we were supposed to spend on it. And what happened is that we authorized a $7.5 million investment over 5 years. And that was supposed to be, and I think all of you on this call can understand this, that was what was supposed to be an installment investment, meaning like a home mortgage, right? You put up the 7.5 million pot and you don't spend more than that. And what it turned into was a credit card loan, right? A revolving loan, meaning we would spend some down and then we would borrow from the proceeds of the building and spend more again. And while the market had been, and I want to stress had, right, based up to recent events, had been up to cover it. So we haven't actually seen our overall balance decrease. We have seen instead, $8 or $9 million that could have been growing the fund balance or growing and expanding NCAE, right, in a more balanced fashion thrown into this project. And yes, there have been some successes, right, with that. But those successes have been largely tilted towards 1 or 2 locals. And we have 115 locals that we need to service right across the state. And my worry is that if we continue down this path, because the returns that we were promised haven't been achieved, that we're going to spend down the pot of money that we had in our investment account, and we will never be able to get that back. So that's the second reason why I'm running. And the third reason why I'm running is that I'm a proud father of a daughter who attends public schools. I actually live in Durham. And I send my daughter to Creekside Elementary. She's a fifth grader. She's going to be graduating here this year. And I want to make sure, right, as we go forward, that the example that we set, right, as a union, is one in which we can say, not only are we fighting for what's right, right, but we are doing so in a way that is building coalitions and building trust and community among all groups. And unfortunately, our organization is experiencing a bit of tension, right? And I think it's important to state that reality. And it's from a good place. It comes from people who have, right, strong opinions and good ideas about what is the best way to move forward. And my hope, right, of running, if nothing else, is to say, right, whoever gets elected to join Christina, and I think Christina is going to make a fabulous president. And I think, as Riley said, right, we should honor and listen to the fact that she, right, acknowledged that she wanted Riley to run with her. But I've now met Matthew in person. I think he's a really great guy. And I think he would also be someone who's well served to leave. But if I could do one thing in this race, it's to try to bring the groups that are tension filled together to say, is there a way that we can work together? Because the stakes are too high outside for us to be divided internally about which way we are going forward, right? With everything that's going on under the current federal administration, with everything that's going on under the current General Assembly in North Carolina, and everything that's going on in many, if not most of the locals, right, in North Carolina and their local communities, I would like to be able to see that. And that's the type of leadership I've brought over the last 11 or 12 years. We too, right, have a school board, right, that supports the idea of strong public schools. In fact, right, not only our school board, but the Orange County Commission, right, gives more money per capita than any other district in the country. But we've done that through an idea or a notion of collaboration. And I think we have to recognize that as strongly as we all feel, not everyone is going to feel the same way that we do. And we need to find ways to connect and make real the issues that we care so deeply about, so that, right, we can deal with the realities on the ground and not say, let's try to win this 6 years from now, but let's do something. And I'll give you an example. Every public employee in North Carolina now has paid parental leave. And they have paid parental leave because we, led by my administration, first pushed it locally. And then I worked with the state and worked with our lead attorney at the time, Verlin, and worked with our lobbyist, Marge Foreman, to get a paid parental leave, right, provision inserted into a piece of legislation that the General Assembly had to pass. It was actually inserted by one of the few Republicans who was still, right, pro-public education and was willing, because of the longtime associations and knowledge, right, that in the relationships that Marge had forged over her 40 years of service, to do so. And so I want to make sure that while we are looking to the big prize in 2030, and I want to say I 100% support, right, repealing the ban on collective bargaining. I support our campaign around, right, raising the per capita spending to $20,000 per student. I support, right, the big ideas, but we know as educators, right, what matters most directly is what's happening in the classroom, right, or in the counselor's office or on the bus, right, or in the cafeteria on a day-to-day basis. And I believe we need to walk and chew gum at the same time, which is we can prepare ourselves for the future going forward, but we also need to acknowledge the reality that's on the ground, and we need to bring our organization together to deal with the reality currently and to try to, you know, build up, right, wins that will help propel our larger vision, but at the same time heal the internal divisions that are happening within our organization, right, so that we can come out united going forward. And if we do that in a fiscally responsible way, and we do that in a way, right, that we don't become like the folks that we are opposing, I think that's an NCAE that I can be very proud to be a part of whether I'm an elected officer statewide or whether I'm happily calling and saying, Riley or Matt, what is it that I can do to help you, right, and help the vision of this administration, right, succeed both in the short term and the long term. So thank you very much for allowing me to speak with you today. I really do appreciate it. And I'm happy after Matthew gets his turn to answer any other questions that you might have. So I'm going to pass the baton to Matthew.
Thank you. Matthew, you're up.
Well, thank you, Brian, for the glowing recommendation. I guess you could say you are a class act. I will say that for sure. I'm Matthew Poston. I grew up here in Forsyth County, but eventually moved to a more rural, local Stokes County. Grew up in the public school system, had plenty of family members that worked for the local school system, and taught in them and educated the many of the students that I am now educating. I am seeing the products of the students that my family, my mother taught, and now I'm teaching her students' children. So, but I believe first and foremost that NCAE, as a union, I feel that we have, and a lot of this is very similar to what Brian said. We are getting away from our democratic roots. We are we've turned into a consolidated system where the power rests with small factions within the state, meaning small counties, making the decisions for all. That's one of the main reasons I decided to run. My belief is that the decisions should be made by and for the members who pay dues and do the work. And democracy is the backbone of a very powerful union. I also believe that NCAE has ignored some of our divisions and not valued their input into the democratic process. I am a strong advocate for our retired school personnel since having family that worked for public school systems. I believe our NCRSP members bring decades of experience and understanding on how policy impacts our schools, and their insight and credibility make them essential voices. So NCRSP should definitely be at the table when there's finance and planning, governmental relations, and anything dealing with the runnings of the union. I have looked at the budget we have. Like Brian said, we're deficit spent for many years. I would like to see that. And if you look at the budget, you will see that a large portion of that is spent on organizing and paying our organizers. I do believe we do need to organize to increase membership across the state so that we can support our union with the money that we bring in. Again, we don't bring enough in member dues to support what we are doing or to run our union. And if we continue, who knows how long the stock market's going to stay up. If we continue to deficit spend and we're digging into our fund balance, who's to say the NCAA will not exist? So financial responsibility is a big goal of mine, and also transparency. Yes, we get to look at the budget when finance and planning puts that together, but I want to ask for more. I want to see a ledger each month of where the money was actually spent. and what line items it falls under to make sure that, members have come to me and said, I would like to know where our money's going. Where is our dues going? So maybe not so much as a dashboard where members can go in the NCAE webpage and put in their password and be able to look up something similar to that. And lastly, I have friends that work here in the small local where I live, and they consistently feel like NCAE has forgotten about them. And I have traveled to all the pre-convention caucuses that were in person and visited them virtually. And I have listened to some of their concerns. And I believe NCAE needs to be inclusive. We need to be democratically led, and we need to reflect every corner of North Carolina, all the way from Transylvania, all the way in the western part of the state to Pasquotank in the eastern part of the state. Power flows from the bottom up. And when we listen to our people, every member's voice is going to feel valued and heard. And that's what I'm here for. I don't want a couple of counties or locals dictating what the entire state is going to do. And I appreciate the time, and thank you for allowing me to be here.
We thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing.
Absolutely.
Being as one of those who's jumped the fence from being active to retired, I can assure you that this retired group is not one to sit back and enjoy our retirement entirely. We're already organizing for the next election, as well as thinking about this General Assembly coming up, and also had a few celebratory thoughts about what was going on in Rockingham County during the primary.
Oh
So,
boy.
yes.
It's
Uh,
23 at last count I saw, right?
Yes.
And
Yes,
there are not
Brian.
enough provisionals or absentee or mail-in ballots to overcome that. So
I'm all with the sheriff. I'm going to ask one more question for you to respond to, and I will remind you that we are videotaping, and it will be shared with those that were unable to join us today, and it will be available on our webpage as well. So be assured that the message will be getting out there. The next one has to do with looking at the retired organization itself. And can you think of some specific areas that you would like NCAE and NCRSP to work together going forward should you be elected? So looking at that special relationship between the parent organization and one of your divisions. And I'll again just go in alphabetical order, starting with Riley and coming down.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I've heard from several retirees that NCRSP is and undervalued in a lot of ways in terms of the work we do as an organization. And I could see a lot of room for improvement from talking with folks like Colleen and Forsyth. I know there's really helpful and empowering ways to have the NCRSP chapters working more closely with their active locals to help with things in their campaigns, whether it's visiting schools, dropping off literature, T-shirts, etc., helping give classes or support to folks who are navigating retirement, helping transfer people from NCAE members to NCRSP members. And the other big one that I hear all the time is when we're doing these mass outreach kinds of campaigns, whether it's for membership or an electoral campaign, that there's a lot of folks in our NCRSP division that would love to know where to plug in and have some time and have some desire to be part of that fight for our schools. And that sort of alignment work between, what are the locals doing, what's NCAE doing, what's NCRSP doing, that alignment work is really critical. And I think there's, massive room for improvement to to sync that stuff up better and have us all part of the same mission, because I think we are fundamentally, all standing up and fighting for public schools, and all deep believers in the importance and potential of NCAE. So I think those things come to mind. And maybe lastly, thinking about ways to, the history of our organization is basically an oral history, right? You don't, active members, younger members, folks like me who've been around 8 or 9 years. It's only by talking to NCRSP members that I hear stories of successes from the 80s and 90s, and hear some of the the experiences, the real, like, emotional stories about what schools were, once upon a time in North Carolina versus where they are now. And that kind of stuff, I think, is really powerful for our members, for our wider base to hear, because, people talk about how a lot of teaching in the 2010s, really don't know, how bad it is, don't really know how things could get better. And I think more, intentional connections and attention paid to everything, all the wisdom and experience of retiree leaders could help, right? Folks have clarity about what we're trying to get back to, and how things don't have to be this grueling, how our working conditions, our pay really has, we can look at the numbers all day long, right? The spreadsheets, but I think the sharing between generations and hearing the stories is also irreplaceable. So I love all those things to be areas of improvement. And then last thing I'll say is, I'll admit, while I've talked to several NCRSP leaders over the last few years and heard different challenges, definitely need more, myself to hear more from y'all about what's been challenging, what hasn't quite worked. So I'm really eager, to work with Christina, Tama, Sandra, other folks to really engage broadly with NCRSP members, to think about what y'all's priorities are over the next few years, what y'all have a lot of energy for and excitement around, what support you need to get done the things you want to get done, and hopefully align it all with a bigger vision that makes us all stronger. So hopefully all those things.
Hey, Brian.
Thank you, Lavetta. So as someone who has served right on the state board with now past, may rest in peace, Dr. Ramey and Linda, and then later Linda and Lena, right? I want to talk about concrete steps. So as a local president and as an officer, and I'm the only one of the three here who has served in that role, we get a list of all the members, right, that are provided in a district. Except we don't get a list of the corresponding retirees from the same local. And even as a regional director, right, we can get access to members lists from the current NCAA members, but we don't have that separate list there. And the reality is that, all three of the gentlemen who are on this call here today, and I salute you all, like we're not full-time release folks. We are in the classrooms working every day, which means if we're going to win this, we need to win it together. And so when you're talking about, right, races that are happening, we had a competitive primary in the U.S. House seat in our district, right? And we could have retirees be out there, right, handing out Apple cards at the polls, right, during the days in early voting when folks like myself have to be in school teaching in the classroom, right? One of my earliest experiences, I first served as a named plaintiff to try to protect career status for every single member of NCAE. And while that was successful for those who already had it, as the named plaintiff for the one person who was there, right, a year before it was supposed to go into action. And I echo Riley's thoughts that it has gotten a lot worse since Phil Berger, Tim Moore, and others took over in 2010, right? But when I was there, they were largely doing press conferences to try to get attention in the media during the day. The court cases were during the day. And most of the people who were there at those press conferences are there to get the necessary coverage and picture were in fact retirees. When you're talking about things like, Governor Stein just issued his call for a temporary budget of $1.4 billion. In that is a 2.5% permanent cost of living adjustment, something that we know is near and dear to the retirees' hearts that has not been something that this legislative assembly has wanted to do. We need to get our retirees into the buildings telling their stories, right? And so that they, on a personal level, from every single local, because again, if we're going to move politicians and not wait until 2030, but if we're going to move them now, we need to have them talking from retirees from every local in the building on legislative lobby days saying why this is important going forward. Your retiree division has a budget of approximately $300,000. You're unique compared to all the other divisions, of the organization. And I know there's been an ask by the retirees, to have a full-time executive director, because right now you're working with two part-time folks who are seated in NCAE's office, who are supposed to be responsive to your needs, but are also sharing time and working for the needs of the state organization as well. And this is part of what I was talking about last time when I say there's some tensions in the room, right? We are all one. No one should be deemed as like, oh, you're a regular NCAE member versus you're a retired member. We all need to be in this and working together. And so what I would certainly say is sitting down with leadership, to go over what can be done within the budget that you currently have, and then using that advocacy on the board that if there are more resources that the retirees need, if it means that we need to divert, some funding, from the general funds of the body to the retirees for a particular purpose, is pushing that forward as part of a board, which is, again, the president and vice president basically serve as chairs or vice chairs of every committee that's on NCAE, including the board of directors. And they sort of set the agenda for what's going on. And so there needs to be a voice for retirees in the room beyond the retiree positions on the board, because that's only 2 of 28 and our board is growing, to ensure that their voices are heard. And so to me, it starts with we need realistically, we need all the parts of NCAE talking to each other. And some of this is we get our reports from NEA, but how is it that we can have complete rosters so that local presidents and local officers can be talking to the same local officers of retirees? How can we make sure that just as we're being fiscally responsible as an organization, that we're providing the help and support to maximize the dues paying dollars that retirees are given? Just literally that happened at our regional caucus. There were questions asked about how are we going to go vote, We have to recognize in the classroom, we talk about differentiation. We have to recognize, think about how this meeting started today, I think we probably all hopped on 3 or 4 times with Zoom and something else like that. There used to be a provision that you could vote, by hand in a written ballot. We have folks, I'm a religious person. They have homebound services, to go and offer communion to those who aren't able to get to church in the first place. We aren't doing, and I would think our organization wants to expand voting rights rather than restricting them, unlike, what we're seeing right now with the SAVE Act that the federal administration is trying to push. So how can we, rather than just saying yep, there's one vendor, one system, good luck for someone who may never have operated, a particular system or on a computer at a particular time, that your voice really just doesn't matter because you can't work a piece of technology, We know the best and the most authentic way of ensuring democracy are hand paper counted ballots. And it may be a little more lengthy. It may cost slightly more. But if we're really talking about involving everyone in the organization, it means just like what I have to do in the classroom. You have some high flyers, AIG kids, You have kids who need some remediation, But they're all in there together. And the job, of the teacher, and I would say the teacher in this analogy is the organization, is to meet the needs of every single one of those individuals. And so I think, right, using retirees to help, right, explain to other retirees about, right, how this might work and having teaching processes or bringing in younger folks there. I also think, right, and I want to be very clear about something. And this is what I was talking about in trying to bring our disparate groups together. I am a believer in this idea of having a caucus like Majority Strong. But I believe that because we don't have the resources to pay organizers, right, to do the work for us. And in fact, right, some of our best successes, Edgecombe was majority local that has receded. They are no longer a majority. Durham has lost more than 500 members, right, since their initial push, right, to get that. And so we need to be able to train one another and use, right? Like labor power is about boots on the ground, feet. It's about time. And retirees, right, can be some of our best assets in terms of we should also be saying as part of like our member organizing that we're training retirees so that they can have that hand-to-hand contact, right, and reach their fellow members to be able to say, yes, your voice matters too. So in sum, right, I would say one, right, going back to this, we need to make sure that the retirees' dollars that they're using are best utilized, right, for their goals and visions. And so if that's an executive director or a lobbyist, to make sure that Jones Street is hearing what retirees need, like cost of living adjustments, that's happening. And right now in our organization, that's not really happening at all, period, because we don't have an actual lobbyist for anyone. Two, right, we need to, as I was saying beforehand, we need to make sure, right, in our organization, that if there are going to be needs, that we weigh the pros and cons of those needs, and if we need to, right, shift funds from one place to another, that we're diversifying our portfolio so that all aspects of our organization are getting heard, and there needs to be a voice in the room to have that happen. It also means there needs to be literally, right, voices being connected to one another, that there shouldn't be this sort of wall or separation, right, it's one here and one there, but we pair starting at the local levels, local rosters, local retiree rosters, creating environments in which they can connect and come together and figure out what are the best ways to use resources. Again, it's right, they say it's not magic, it's organizing. You get results when you turn out at a county commission that is otherwise a sleepy meeting that like 3 people turn out to. Who are great people to help fill those seats? Retirees, especially because in many locals, board meetings aren't done at a time and place where it's able for folks who are working during the day to go that. Like there are many districts where local school boards and county commissions are holding their meetings during the day, which basically neuters or eliminates the voices of educators, but retirees could be there. We have to say, you are a valuable resource that we are severely underutilizing. You're the largest actual body, right, in our organization. There is no one local that comes close to the number of retirees. And if we want to talk about being efficient, right, this is where that priority should be placed. And then, as I said, finally, right, we need to differentiate. We need to understand that not everyone is the same, and we need to make sure that we are doing what we can to involve everyone in the process. So if that's talking about how do we get paper ballots or even bringing folks right to ballots to cast absentee ballots or to work with trainings, saying around a local library where folks can come together just like you have souls to the polls right on a Sunday. How can we get right retirees to the polls that if we're going to do voting online, that we can help train people while still respecting the secret ballot to bring them together? That's my hope. That's my vision going forward. But again, I respect the democratic process. And right, should Riley get elected or Matthew get elected, I am ready to support them 100%. But I hope, and what I'm doing here now is to lay out there the things that should either one of these gentlemen get elected, that I hope they will listen to and learn from and make a part of the organization if they become the leaders going forward. And since I think you said this is the last question, I just want to thank both of my fellow candidates. It is an honor to be on the same platform. I think it's terrific that it's in this election, but we're also lucky, Christina, and a great incoming NEA director-elect in Shauna. And I think no matter who folks choose, there's going to be a great team that's going to help NCAA going forward. So thank you very much for this opportunity to answer that question.
Thank you. And now, Matthew?
Yes, thank you. Ditto. I NCRSP members are directly impacted by the decisions that we make. And in my view, and I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, it's almost like when our educators retire, NCAE just puts them out to pasture, as the old saying goes. And, we don't utilize our NCRSP members. I work in Forsyth. I work alongside Colleen Lanier, who I adore. And I'm constantly asking her, what are retirees wanting to do? And the list is numerous. I think NCAE and NCRSP, there's not one thing I think NCAA needs to do better. There's a lot of things I think NCAA needs to do better. And Brian mentioned some of those. But one of those is government relations. As I mentioned earlier, NCRSP members are directly impacted by the decisions we make when endorsing our legislative candidates. These legislative candidates are going to decide on policies related to your pension, your health care, the state budget. And I've looked at your strategic plan and some of your goals. And Brian mentioned the COLA increase and the tax-free, I think it was premium healthcare or tax-free healthcare plans. Nowhere have I seen NCAE trying to help fight for those things for our retired division. As for so government relations is a huge priority for me, and I actually just submitted an MBI related to NCRSP and how they interact with our local unions that have a GRC committee, requiring that our locals have a member from the GRC in that county or that local on their endorsement committee and be a voting member of that. And there's other ones that I'm currently working on. Currently working on one for ICE as well, which leads into the social justice platform and NCRSP's work in social justice. Finance and planning. Brian's correct. We can't afford to hire a bunch of educators. But I know through working with Colleen, she takes her own time. She goes to Raleigh to visit legislatures. And she does that because she believes in public school education, as do many of our North Carolina retired school personnel. And we are not utilizing their experience. We're not utilizing their historical knowledge. And this is an intergenerational union. And we constantly say we are a family, but are we treating all of our members as part of that family and not the black sheep or, the outsider? And that's not how I am viewing. I'm not viewing NCAE as we preach social justice, and I'm not bashing our union at all. One thing you'll know about me is I come with no predetermined ever since I joined NCAE, I have jumped in full throttle. A lot of it's done behind the scenes. I don't have a bunch of titles, but I do a lot of things behind the scenes because I want NCAA to be better. And there are tons of things that we can do to make our union better, which is inclusive of all. And NCRSP, as Brian mentioned, you are our largest local, even though we call you a division. So we are not harnessing the knowledge and the power of our NCRSP members. They are wanting to do things for the union. They are wanting to be at the polls handing out Apple cards. They are wanting to sit in on our executive board meetings and offer insight, even though they don't have a necessarily voting power. And to have 2 out of 28 members on the executive board, and them being the largest division, or I'll call you local, because that's unheard of. That's underrepresentation. And I just want to let y'all know that I will be a harsh advocate for NCRSP. I have been listening to you guys, and if you know Colleen Lanier, you know she tells it like it is as well, and she's going to be truthful, honest, brutal, but sweet at the same time. And I've been looking at the NCRSP page and trying to write MBIs to support the North Carolina retired school personnel. So there's not one faction within NCAE that I can want to tie NCRSP into. You guys should be wrapped all in it. And that's my belief. And again, thank you for the time. I don't want to, it's almost 5:30. I value time. It's almost dinner. So I will let you go. And also I know you have choices to make between the three of us. You can't go wrong with either three. And you make decisions every day as educators, as retirees. You make thousands of decisions a day. So no matter what decision you make, I too, as Brian mentioned, think Brian and Riley are just as worthy as me to stand up there and represent you guys. But I do ask you for your support, and I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you. I can say, as I have written to all three of you several times, how thankful I am to see that there are people who are interested in leading this organization that we have as retirees given many hours to. I know for myself, I've been involved multiple times in the endorsement process and still remain active in my interest in that area of the organization. I too know Colleen because she and I used to teach in the same building. And I will remind everyone that the election begins on March the 22nd and will end on April the 3rd. And so I hope everyone will cast their ballot for the candidate that they feel most strongly about in leading this organization. I want to thank all three of you for joining us through this chaotic afternoon of trying to get back together after we got kicked out of the first one. Again, it will be available to all of our members so that they can see and hear your comments. And I want to welcome you ahead of time to Greenville, since Greenville is my home. So I look forward to seeing you in person and live at the convention this in just a couple of weeks. So in between, go forth and do good works.